Unity through diversity is like a big party where everyone brings their own special dish, just like each dish has its own flavor. Each person has their own unique gifts and qualities. On our podcast, we will be breaking bread with guests who are dishing out their own personal stories and sharing us just how delicious diversity can be. So put on your dancing shoes, grab a fork and knife, and let's celebrate unity through diversity in style.
Hello, everyone. We all feeling being human is not easy. Being a human with greater awareness is even harder. We went through so many life events to teach us valuable lessons. In this week's episode, I'm bringing on my dear Akashic Record teacher, soul family, Candice Rasa, the founder and the CEO of Rasa Healing. I have been working with Candice in the last 3 years and a half through Akashic Record healing, and I gained so much understanding and knowledge for my human life in this lifetime and my past lifetimes. If you are on your healing journey, if you want to have a deeper understanding on your soul origin, your ancestral trauma, the soul contracts, you will find this episode is one of those episodes that can give you deeper insight on your soul journey. And enjoy the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Unity Through Diversity. And on this beautiful Monday morning, I'm here with my dear teacher, mentor, sister, maybe past life, all the things that we work together, that's Candice Rasa from Rasa Healing. So Candice, welcome, my teacher.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you're like a fellow teacher, I feel like we're sisters and we are like love warriors together. And I'm just so excited to be in unity with you, to be in love with you, to be in service with you in the world. So I can't wait to talk to you today more about all of that.
So for us to, before we dive into all the questions and before this podcast, before this recording, we were joking. I was like, hey, Candice, you know that I have 3 pages of questions for you because why I say that, I'm going to proper introduce you, okay? Because just from you say hi. By the way, if you guys want to go back to check our first recording, I aired that on June 1st, which is the episode 15, right? 15. And for this one, when we release, probably going to be episode 660. It was crazy period of time. Amazing. But last time I just had Candice just, where are you from? All the simple thing. But this time, I feel like for us to unpack a lot of spiritual journey about our humanness in this lifetime, I want to just give you a proper introduction, okay? So, and also excuse me if I mess up some words, because then I want to dive into those words because they mean so many things. The words carry a lot of information, right? Okay. Yeah. So Candice is the founder of Rasa Healing and has 15 years experience utilizing transpersonal and existential and humanistic therapy to catapult soul-level transformation in clients. She has served this community as a therapist since 2007 and started her career supporting the HIV plus community interweaving spirituality and psychotherapy. Candice also has 7 years experience as clinical director of 3 addiction treatment centers in Florida, studying spirituality and developing programs to enhance connections. Candice utilizes holistic perspectives, including Buddhist psychology and mindfulness to focus on mental, emotional, and spiritual healing, not just for an individualized framework, but with an awareness of ancestral karma. In addition to being a licensed clinical social worker and qualified supervisor in the state of Florida, Candice also completed a karma yoga as a Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health and is certified in integrated energy therapy, Akashic Records, journey, dance, channeling, and mediumship and mindfulness meditation techniques. All right.
Fancy. So, that's a fancy intro.
It's really fancy. Also, I feel that just we focus on this introduction, we're gonna run for a couple hours of the deep conversation. So first of all, will you help us to unpack those 3 very important words like the transpersonal and existential and humanistic therapy, and also another word is the soul level transformation, right? Because I think this is probably the you probably thought through this 1,000,000 times to form this sentence. So I would like to explain or relate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm just going to dive right in. The work that I do, I would say about 10 to 15 years ago when I began the work, wasn't really accepted as much as it's accepted now. And what's really cool is to see transpersonal psychology showing up. And transpersonal essentially means like allowing the psychology of a person to be inclusive of their spiritual journey, as well as like non-physical values and like integrating transcendent aspects of the human experience. So non-physical aspects like our ability to connect to something larger, for example. So there's this sort of psychology involves holistic, physical, spiritual wellness, mental wellness for people. So there's a whole class of like types of interventions, like Reiki could be considered Akashic records, like would be considered transpersonal work and intermingled with psychology. Humanistic work is really about deep focus on personal growth and self-actualization. The humanistic approach is the human and how that person is relating to their world around them. Okay. So it's not just like you doing the work on your own emotions for yourself. It's about the relationship you have to your own sense of self, your own sense of like, I am that I am, or the God consciousness, and that relationship in the world. And then existential is a theory, a spiritual theory in psychology that connects to like relationship building with concepts beyond yourself. So there's an existential, like bringing in God and however you define it, or nature, or spirit, or astrology. Like existential is like taking a point of awareness in this moment, in this life, and looking at it from a larger perspective. Looking at it from a higher perspective and your dynamic in that. I have just never been able to experience life from the point of place that I am in just now. I have always been someone who experienced life in the human body and then expanded out from there. Like, wow, how is this all connected to everything else, and you and the stars and the plants and the cycles and the planets? I just experienced the world that way. So soul level transformation is about combining these modalities to help people see their relationship with more than just the emotions or the thoughts they're having or the people in their life. Seeing their relationship from a soul perspective means seeing their journey up to this moment across time and space, across ancestor, and across all the connections in divine order. That's probably like a very fluffy answer, but I could try to be more specific as we talk about it, but I hope that helps.
That helps a lot. Actually, through this explanation, I can see how those three were so powerful, basically included every direction, inside out, upside down, different time, space, yes. all combined into those three words. Right?
And that really came forward when I was working with the HIV population in my career, because it was like, you have to take context, as part of the therapeutic experience. You have to take purpose as part of the human experience. There's just, without that, and I think Viktor Frankl is a huge inspiration for my own psychotherapy journey in terms of my work in the world, is because he invented logotherapy, and logotherapy is basically like, we can experience any how if we have a perspective and understanding of a larger why.
Yeah.
Logotherapy is about your point of meaning in experiences. It drives people to ask those larger questions. And I mean, I work with people one-on-one who are craving that, right? Like CBT therapy, that's great, wasn't enough for someone who's been in prison for 20 years, who couldn't understand why they had all this trauma and drug addiction history. Like, they needed to understand and experience and relate to their pain in a larger, bigger way. They needed to find meaning in that. And yes. I feel like if we don't do that as clinicians, as healers, like, we're missing the interconnectedness of all that is. And I think people are craving that now more than ever, which is really amazing. But for me, that inspiration started when I was working in the jails.
Yes. And then the great thing is you touch on both the HIV and in jail. Those are normally, people don't really get in touch with those specific groups. Both those two groups are very unique and specific group. And my next question is actually, there's two, but I think we can see whether I can ask those two questions all in one. Your experience working with the HIV community and also with the prison and also other, feel like you have very unique this how you serve at the beginning of your spiritual journey or how you serve. Now, when you're looking back, have you ever asked yourself or asked on the soul level? Because we talk about soul transformation, and we are actually on our journey of soul transformation in this lifetime when we will serve other people because we are serving each other. So how you see working with those specific group, unique group on your own soul transformation?
I mean, I can't hardly speak about it without getting emotional because all of those clients are my teachers. And without those experiences, I wouldn't be who I am today. And because of my ability to become intimate with the suffering that is happening every day in ways that most people don't see, I had to see that face to face every day and the suffering of others. Systemic suffering, not just personal suffering, but looking at how the system created that suffering as well. And hearing those stories of those people really just blew me away. I think issues of racism were also really relevant. You know, I had some really powerful emotional moments with Black men in jail who were like, I want your help. I know you can help me, but I don't want to be helped by a white woman to get out of jail. You know, it was a really, like, there were some powerful relationships. And you know, I don't know if I've talked about this, but my role particularly was I was the only one in the company I worked for, as a nonprofit I worked for, to go in the jail and assess people to see if they were appropriate from an emotional and mental health perspective, so like a mental health evaluation, and then determine their appropriateness to get out of jail to enter a 9-month addiction program specifically for HIV positive individuals. So my word to the judge would matter. So I would write letters to the judge, try to get people out of jail that I felt could really thrive in an environment outside of jail. So as you can imagine, the relationships I had with people were really deep and profound, and there was a ton of like connection and gratitude even after that. But for me, I just felt like in that moment, in that season, it was an instrument to my own spiritual growth. I was definitely serving, but I felt like I was receiving more than I was serving. You know, my own personal perspectives on life, on spirituality. Like, that's when I asked all my big questions about God, is during that time. Like, how is it that these souls are in these situations and I was in this situation? And not, you know, in terms of suffering, in terms of trauma, like, it can't just be random. You know, it was though that was the key moment in my life that really drove big questions that honestly nobody could answer in my life. Nobody. And I went to the retreat center, Kripalu, you read that in my intro, and that's where a lot of my study began, in some of these existential, you know, transpersonal practices.
Okay, so that's a follow-up question. I always tell people now, I don't really know what you went through because I was not in your body. I'm not you, because really that's the thing that I want to relate back, because normally it's just not normal people would face. But also on your soul level, you chose to work in these places, right? Like you say, they are your teachers. Do you think on certain level, because you witness so many things that maybe in the system, maybe unfair, whatever scenario it is, do you feel part of contribute that now you want to give back even more? Because, you know, after years of all the skills that you pick up in your tool belt, right? Of course, you are not the same Candice 10 years ago, because now you have more skills. Look at all the intro, all the healing modality you picked up. Actually, this is also a question for myself as well, is because we witnessed so many harsh things in our life. When we finally in the position we will serve, we want to serve more, because you know that those are the things people are needed. And that also contributes to your own like driven, like you want to go do, because our energy is super fast, we talked about before, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, once the fire was lit of like this integrative approach of engaging spirituality and purpose and meaning and helping people make sense that they're not an accident, that everything that's happened to them is for them, and to really deepen that through conversations with people who've had serious, like multi-year trauma, you know, that like those moments inspired me now to really inform the work that I'm doing, to work on that shadow level, to work on that level of like deeper soul, like meaning and purpose, and drawing connections from our ancestry, drawing connections from our pain. And, you know, like I realized in those moments that like there's so much pain and suffering that I was witnessing in these people. And there's one story in particular that I can still remember. Like yesterday, I worked with a client who was like severely sexually abused by an uncle, and there was a lot of intimidation, and he would harm animals in front of her as a form of intimidation. And she was talking about this in therapy with me, and she had hearing damage from him. So she would have to sit like a couple of inches away from my face to talk to me so that she could actually hear me. And she said to me one day, she looked right at me, and she was a couple of inches away, and she said, "That man stole my life from me." And, you know, there was nothing that I had in a toolbox from my master's program that could respond appropriately to her. And the only thing I said was, "You're right. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you." And it was like nobody had ever validated her pain before. And she put her head down on the desk and she sobbed for like 30 minutes. And I just put my hand on her back. And it was then that I realized, and this is the work that I do now, like holding sacred space for people's pain is so needed right now on the planet. There's such a sense of like fix it and be the things, and all the media that's now tech that's coming on, and people show their best self forward on all their social media platforms. Like people need permission to be in pain. They need permission to be in sacred spaces with their pain. I do not believe that we are here to cure pain. I think we are here to make pain sacred. That's what I think we're here to do. And I am on fire because of those earlier experiences to teach that in the world to anyone who will listen, which is why I have such a mission now to collaborate with people like you who are doing the work that is in alignment with the work that I want to be doing, to just continue to spread that message of permission and access.
Yes, I totally agree on give people permission to validate what they're going through without trying to change their change how they're feeling and want to fix them. There's sometimes nothing to be fixed, and allow them to emotional, right? And actually this tied up to the question that there was next question I was going to ask you, is like, how did you build this trust there early especially when you're working with people in the prison, right? Or HIV positive, or people certainly so sure that everything just losing their life, they're in the deep trench that won't be able to come up. And in those kind of scenarios, like how do you build trust with those clients?
Yeah, I mean, to say that I was worlds away from their life experience is an understatement, right? I'm a white woman, you know, from a middle class family. I do come from an immigrant family, but I had very little in common with them. And I know now that very strongly that some of my intuitive skills that were not yet known in me were really showing up as I'm a projector in human design, right? There's a lot of psychic empathy that I've now learned about myself that I'm sure helped in relating. But something that I really focused on in terms of connection, and I think I'm glad you asked this question, because we need these skills in the world to be with people that are different, that we can't relate to, is that there was a lot of amplification of their voice, especially in terms of racism and not understanding their experiences, like helping people to feel seen and to hear their stories and to not personalize stories and to give them conscious space to talk about their experiences was so key. And I think that built a lot of trust in the relationships I had, even with that particular male client that I worked with, where it was just like, well, I don't want you to get me out of jail, but I kind of need you to get me out of jail. Mm-hmm. I'm having all these complicated feelings around racism. And I said, okay, well, like, you know, how can I be of service to you here? You know, what would feel good to you to be of service? And I think people know when they feel empathy. People know when they're have a safe space to talk about their truth. And there was just a desire that I had to understand, a deep true desire to understand. And really simultaneously, what I was doing as well was asking my own higher self, which at the time I had no name for, help me, help them. This body, this
Yeah.
person, this life experience is just not enough to be able to hold space for understanding their life. Show me, help me. And that's when I started to get the trickle of my channel and my higher self beginning to like give me information, and I would start to trust what popped into my head. Like that client in that moment where she was struggling, it wasn't education that I had in my master's program that said to tell her you're right. It was just like, wow, she needs to be validated in her pain. So following my intuition, following the call of giving people permission also to just feel, I think built those relationships, a deep desire to understand, to listen, a deep desire to listen. I was there to listen. I was not there to provide feedback or here's how to help you. The work I do now also is about listening and being really delicate with that idea of providing guidance from a space of Akasha. Like there has to be consent. And I think that self-determining piece is critical to relationship building. I think in my role there was natural as a social worker, but I think we don't embody this in the world, and we need to do more of that, which is people's pain, people's stories, people's narratives and journeys are valid for them. And that has nothing to do with me. Like if someone's projecting their pain and their suffering on to others, a lot of times I think it's hard for us to hear people's pain without personalizing it or making it something we need to defend or our ego then needs to show up and jockey for. I think that's a struggle we have as a human race as well. Like when we hear things that are triggering, perhaps someone has a different value that we have or a different religion that we have or a different political position, we just can't hold space for other people. And I think there's quite a skill in being able to be like, you are allowed to be you and the journey that you've walked, and I'm here to just hold space for that. My ego doesn't need to get involved in that. And I think that was something that I was trained to do, certainly as a social worker, that enabled those relationships in the jail. And those clients to this day, that was my favorite job I ever had. I made less than $30,000 a year. I was there for 9 years. It was the best job I ever had. And it was really hard to leave. Yeah. For all the reasons and more.
I feel like you went through a training that time for sure, right? And to kind of summarize here, I feel like what I heard is like try to understand, right? And then like listen, validate whatever they are feeling. And still this back to this humanness, like we talked about before even recording, like literally this is being a human. That time doesn't matter what kind of tool, what kind of healing modality you carry, doesn't work, just being a human. And then, you know, I think this is probably going to be a big theme of this podcast recording. I just had I don't want to say coworker, client, or maybe a friend that she went through some very like important transformation in her life. And we were talking about that, like literally we're talking about what kind of support she needs. And sometimes we talk about those things and I realize that a lot of time we are not human, are not trained to hold a space for some traumatic and dramatic situation. We don't know what to say. Literally, like either we try not to talk about it or try to cut it. We never trained to be there for this person. Yes. And the more we aware of that, even for myself, at beginning, you know, I'm from this Chinese culture, like we don't like conflict. I will avoid everything at all costs. But a lot of time, universe, especially last couple of years, I call conscious communication now. Like the skill that they train, put me on the spot. They're like, hey, it's discomfort, but we want you to be here to feel all the discomfort and not acting on it. And it was brutal. I don't like it. I try to fight for it. But back to, you know, what you're saying is like, we just want to bring this awareness to the audience is that we are not trained, and the discomfort you have is part of the humanness journey. And just tell this person sometimes, hey, I really, really don't know exactly what you went through. I'm sorry. I'm here. You know, that.
Yeah. I mean, if I could just say what you said there cannot be underscored and underlined enough. I think that it's huge what you said. And honestly, I think there's a lot of problems we have as a system that are connected to the lack of permission. and maybe the lack of skills for people to just be in pain. I think toxic masculinity, there's a lot that's connected to little boys and not being allowed to cry and not being allowed to express emotion in the culture. And certainly cultures, Cuban culture is where I'm from, Chinese culture, like there's all these unspoken rules that you have to follow. And I think to make it really simple for our listeners is that giving people permission to feel in your presence is not even more than enough, almost like the most important thing you can do. And maybe it sounds like this. I see your, and Thich Nhat Hanh is such an eloquent way of saying it. A Buddhist monk, I follow his work. Darling, I see your suffering. That's how he phrases it. Right? Darling, I see your suffering. And how can I support you there? Really, it's I see you and I give you permission to be where you are. And I notice when I work with people one-on-one, there's a lot of, even now, almost every session, there's some deep emotional moment. And I wonder, like, is it the Akasha? Is it me? Is this combination? I don't know what it is. I'm still in speculation around that. But I think there's a safe spaces that people are looking for in order to have those emotional releases. And every time I see it come up, I always take a moment of opportunity because I can feel it in people. People are programmed that it's not okay. They start to apologize for being emotional in my presence. So I now have like this automatic statement where I say to them, it is safe for you to be emotional right now. I can hold space for that. Take all the time you need. Take anything you need. It is safe here to be that. Yeah. And I just say that. And sometimes I have to convince people because they're bursting at the seams for that. They need it, but they're not allowing that permission in themselves because we've grown up in societies and cultures and teams and families and genders with all of these expectations around what that means, right? Like we're not powerful. We don't succeed. I don't even know the storylines because I feel like I'm so far away from that world, but I feel so much of my work is about granting that permission. And I think a lot of healing would happen on the planet if we did it as a collective.
Yes, the part that you said, how can I support you? I realized in through my own, connection with people, it's so crazy that we start what people need. And actually that's not what they need. When people going through things that you like ask them, oh, where do you want to eat? Or when do you want to meet? And then this friend literally told me, now that we are going through that, she literally told me that I wish people could just tell me where to go and where to meet, because when they are in this, let's say, healing or grieving process of their journey, every single decision to them is a lot pressure. I didn't know that. And I was like, oh, that's what you want? Like every single person teach you in different scenario how to interact with them. Now I'm going to text her, hey, do you have time on the 14th or 15th at noon? I'm going to meet you at there. Can you show up there? Easy and simple. And I was like, it's a question of, instead of tell people what to do, or because we are so careful, right? Because we don't want to add more of a,
we don't know what to do. We don't know how to, and it's okay to ask. Yeah. Would it be helpful if I just designed and, created this routine and this schedule for us? Would that be helpful for you? Or would you like to tell me what you need? Like what would be helpful? I mean, you can ask that. It's okay to ask that.
Yes, that's beautiful. So I think we are kind of like completed on there. So I'm gonna actually change the our direction for a little bit. We want to back to your own spiritual journey. I know those years of, we already touched on working with specific group people, right? Really shaped you. And you mentioned that you started asking big questions, right? And you went to for the yoga training, right? And from there, I think everything just started. So will you kind of like briefly kind of not say recap, but some like highlights, biggest moments to help you have like, wow, okay, everything I served makes sense. Now here I am. Because a lot of time we are integrating. I feel like myself, first 40 years, I'm literally integrating my human experience. I haven't not arrived yet until like this year. I would say 39, 38, this, close to 40. I'll be 40 this year. I feel like I'm more complete of understanding my first 40 years of my life. So maybe you can go back to those moments of the, oh yeah, that's those connections.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the addiction field for probably 15 years after I left the nonprofit and the jail system. I worked in private addiction treatment centers, and I sort of worked in leadership and program and curriculum development, designing therapeutic systems that would help collectives in a treatment center heal with the compass of spirituality, and really believing in the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
So what made you to choose to work in this addiction treatment?
Oh, that
Because
is the question. It chose
yes,
me, right? There's
okay.
past life history there for sure. I still to this day, people ask me what my drug of choice was, and I don't have an answer. I'm not, and I have experienced active addiction, but a lot of people in recovery, I've gotten this feedback a lot, you know, like, oh, you sound like someone who's been in recovery, right? The way you speak about it. And you know, there's a past life history of experiencing that for sure. But there was something about it for me where it's like watching people divorce themselves from connection that felt really sad for me to watch. I had just had a lot of empathy, and I've always had a lot of empathy for people, the kind of people in the world that other people don't have empathy for. Truth be told, when I was in my internship for social work school, my first place that they plopped me in was the state attorney's office, where social workers and attorneys would celebrate people getting incarcerated, because that was their job, was like, you know, put them in jail. And I went back to my school and I was like, this is not the place for me, because I don't feel celebratory about this. I feel sad. I feel like wondering why people in court don't have representation, why there's not cultural interpreters there, like what's going on in the system. And so they pulled me out of there and they stuck me in the other place where I was working with people in the jail from the other side of the coin. And I just sort of found myself in these populations with people that are on the outskirts, that are not well understood. And truth be told, also, I also worked in a very, very high-end treatment center with people that are millionaires and celebrities, football stars, TV personalities. And I did addiction treatment with them. And it's amazing to look at the similarities between those two worlds and the way that people feel. Like, we're just not that different. And so, you know, again, there's a lack of understanding and empathy, I think, that folks tend to have. And, you know, the universe created the path for me. The doors open, I walked the path. And, you know, I was really, really interested in looking at the systems of creating. And that's what I do now in my practice. Like, what system and container can bring people from over here to over here? And really the over here is like love, connection, permission, access to their higher self. I was always doing that in some way in whatever system the universe put me in. And I now get to do that with like full creative freedom. Whereas before I had to operate and negotiate in systems that were not designed that way. And I learned a ton of great people skills in that. So I know why spirit put me there, right? Negotiating, having a lot of head buddy conversations. I've been in board meetings, I can't tell you how many times, the only clinical person, everybody's in finance and admissions and recruiting and CEO of the company. And I'm the one who's like responsible for representing the clients. And I'm like, well, that's not a good choice, because that's not an ethical choice, and we can't do that. And I felt like I was constantly fighting this battle, this bureaucracy, this red tape. And my husband said to me, like, is this really where you want to be? And I said, you know, there's a warrior in me. There's a Mars in my first house, right? Like, I have the power to be gritty, and I have the power to be an advocate, but I don't want to be an angry person in the world. I don't want to be fighting the system. I want to heal the system in another way. And that's when I backed out of that garage from those, you know, probably 5 to 7 years in leadership in addiction treatment centers. I backed out of that garage and I was like, I'm going to create it myself. I don't need a system that pushes up against me. I don't need to fight the system. And Chief Joseph has got this amazing speech where he's like bloody and beaten, like on a hilltop, famous historical speech where he puts down his bow and he basically says, you know, we're all kind of battered here, and we're not going to win this battle. He says, but I have my dignity and I have the space where I know what I want to create and live my final days. And he puts this sword down and he says, so I will fight no more forever. I will fight no more forever. And I've been inspired by that. You know, I think that I have been a warrior in many lifetimes. I probably have committed a few crimes of passion in past lifetimes. It's not my journey. And I have a lot of love for people that have that journey, right? We need people on the front line who are saying, I just know for me, that's not where my highest good is, because it just creates an anger in me and it brings out a frequency that's just not who I want to be. Of course, then I manifest a Lyran child starseed who's also a warrior who builds weapons out of Amazon boxes. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I come from a long line of that, and I'm super intentional. This life is about system creation of pathways of love. And I'm going to be in systems with people who facilitate that permission and not confront that permission, because there are many ways to heal the world. There are many ways to change the world. And I certainly don't back down from my honesty and transparency about the work, but I want to be careful that I am the energetic that I am teaching. And I can't be that if I'm in situations in communities where there's just tremendous pushback.
Yeah. That's the circle back on the warrior energy, right? And I feel like, I had the same feeling of like in the different past lifetime, I probably just probably committed some crimes in good way or bad way. I don't know. But a lot of time in last, especially my teen 20s, 30s, I can feel unfair, need to fight for people. And I did actually. But those couple years, I mean, we're going to talk about a little bit just like Buddha's teaching as well, because I think Buddha's teaching helped me. When I was in China, I was reading those books. It didn't make any sense to me. Let's say 12 years ago, I started reading those things. It didn't make sense to me. And I started to read again because I brought some books from China and back here in the United States when I went back to visit my parents in China. And it started to making sense. And I'm reading the same book, but it didn't make any sense until probably 3-5 years ago. So I kind of want you to relate on this warrior energy, meeting with Buddha, Buddhism, Quang, all this, energies from Eastern teaching part. I think you probably have something to say.
I do, because I teach every year at the Florida Conference for National Social Workers. And every year I submit a proposal that's like a little bit more daring than what they normally accept. And I'm like, let's see if they let me talk this year. I keep pushing the edge, and I've been doing a lot on Buddhist teaching there. And social workers have a fundamental value to change they have a social justice commitment. And I'm a social worker. It's in my blood. It's a sorority, fraternity type feeling. And I have made many cases to social workers, the power of Gandhi through silent protest and how many laws he changed. The power of love and the power of unity has just as much grit and magnitude of changing the world than with fight. And I'm making that case through his work, and I make that case in the work I do now. And I'm super passionate about that for people who would like to transform their relationship with the warrior. There's a mantra that I say from one of Sam Garrett's songs. It's one of my favorite ones. It's like, I walk softly on this earth in the light of God's name. I walk softly on this earth in the light of God's name. We emanate from us an energetic that is felt in our field through our words and our choices and our actions and our relationships. If we think for 1 second that we can bring the light into the world in that way with intention and have it not, impact people in a positive way, we are not realizing how powerful we are. I feel like the way we change the world is in these little moments where we're showing up with kindness and love and purpose and happiness. Not that the world is always like that, right? Because it's clearly not. I know that from my own life experience. But when you have access to that energy, we change the world in those ways as well. I think this is more important now than ever. And I'm going to use this as a segue to talk about Buddhism, but the astrology and the Akasha, I've been saying a lot about interrelationship and collaboration among diverse views. I think your podcast is a great birth of this initiative on the planet, which is we must learn to interrelate. We must learn to interrelate. This is not about screaming at each other from across the pond to get somebody else to swim across to believe what you believe. This is about building a bridge and having hard conversations and loving people where they are. We cannot will people into our own values. This is where I think fight falls short, where the warrior falls short. The warrior is willing to die in a hill. The warrior is uncompromising. The warrior is a survivalist. I think about, that's why I call myself a love warrior. I'm here to be very sturdy in the name of love, and I will act passionately and committedly in that spirit like a warrior would. But love is about unconditional regard for everything, including yourself. Buddhism, honestly, for me, has taught me to quell has taught me to rest, has taught me to be in peace with suffering and injustice. Not that I look the other way, or that this sort of thing is to be okay in the world, but Buddhism teaches us that is just what it is. The world is, right? Pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's pain. Buddhism is not a religion. It's a path. It's a lifestyle. It's about seeing everything with compassion, being curious about your attachments, looking at your ego, and developing mindful awareness of what's showing up for you. I teach social workers 10, I talk about some 10 concepts of Buddhism and how that relates to social work and changing the world in a macro level. So like really taking social justice to a place of compassion, to a place of love. And Buddhism has beautiful practices for that, like the law of impermanence, right? Like everything changes. You can't control anything. It's always moving, right? So as a warrior, right, we may have an attachment to something that then changes, that then mobilizes into something else. And then we get, then we get angry. We want to control more. We don't want that to happen. I think when we can accept the world as it is, we're like more than half the battle of healing the world, because a lot of us just really struggle with accepting what is, and understanding that things will change, understanding that people will change. And I just think there's so many beautiful things. I could probably talk about Buddhism all day, and I do. Certainly in the academic world, I talk about its real purpose in healing, both clinically and macro. But I'm happy to answer more questions about it if you have them.
So do you feel now, I personally feel like energy opened, like if you're talking about not even the last 10 years, but let's use 10 years as the to compare. Okay. I know that 10 years ago, the challenge you had in your career or in the community will be different from now on, right? And because
100%.
Right, the energy now is very open. So,
yes,
but we still have challenges. But I want, because you've been in the field way longer, than me. I mean, I'm still tell people, I'm a baby bird. Just as much as I think how many things are dabbing to trust me. I was like, every day I'm learning so many things, but you've seen so much in the last 15 years, even more. So when you looking back to these challenges, like, can you give us through your own experience, the challenge before and challenge now, and what are some challenges we're still going to face in the future? Because a lot of the healer or energy worker like myself, they came online last 5 years, 3 years, or they're coming online right now. We are in different era. Sorry to interrupt the conversation. We spent lots of time and energy to bring those episodes to the public. To best support this podcast is to share with someone you think they would like those stories, and take a few minutes to leave us a positive review on the podcast platforms that you are listening on. And do not forget to subscribe this podcast for the future episodes notifications. Thank you, and let's back to the conversation.
Yes. Right? I mean, I've talked about this on social media, but I had a lot of direct rejection from being someone who integrated transpersonal theory into my work as a licensed therapist. For example, inviting the Akasha into the space of healing and psychotherapy was very rejected 10 years ago. I had office space situation where people wouldn't let me have office space, called me the Antichrist, this sort of thing. And it was really important. I always describe those as delicious teachers. Those are delicious teachers in our life, to challenge me to my identity, call me to my identity. Who are you? Who do you want to be? So that was the challenge then. I would say I'm shocked that I'm here now. I just sort of continue to follow my heart, but I never had a plan, like I'm going to do this in the world. I'm going to be doing spiritual integration with psychotherapy and teaching people systems for soul healing. Like I always thought I was like, I wanted to be part of leading and being in groups, but I never knew really what that meant. And I was fine doing that in the therapeutic sense as a therapist. I never really, this just took off because I was so inspired by the folks I work with in the jail. So I think like we as a collective used to talk less about intangible, holistic spiritual work being integrated in mainstream reality. That was the issue 10 years ago. I think the issue now we're having is how we make sense of the ripples of change that are arriving. And the Akasha wants me to say more about this. I feel like that this is a big thing, that there is consciousness that's coming forward about the imbalances in our systems, financially, culturally, from a place of race and gender and sexual orientation and financial institution and health and all of these systems, our government systems, we are receiving coding. Children are coming in receiving coding about how the world wants to look differently. And there tends to be a ripple, almost like someone pulls like a blanket and fluffs it up in the air, and the big ripple flows down. In these ripples, people can be very disjointed and very uncomfortable. There's lots of conflict that comes to the surface, and emotion and trauma that comes to the surface. And the mistake I think we make a lot now is what we were alluding to a bit earlier, which is a real defiance and strong obsession with getting our perspectives to be seen by everyone immediately. And there's just like a room full of yelling people, right? I think these ripples are meant to inform policy, are meant to inform human behavior, are meant to ask hard questions. I think as a result of the ripple, what's needed now is not to scream at each other, but to be curious with one another, to be sitting with one another. The world needs more of that. The world needs like unstructured, uncomfortable, consistent spaces like the human library, where you can sit with someone of a differing person or value and just talk to them. You can check out a person for the day and talk to them. Like, we need more of those spaces. We need podcasts like yours. I think we're having issues with technology today, where technology is advancing and there's not enough space for true, honest, authentic connection. That's an issue. And it creates more polarity, because then the algorithms are creating mechanisms of magnetism to you of people of like mind. There's not enough exposure to diversity. Then we live in these silos. How can we heal with Pluto and Aquarius in the next 20 years, which is about people-led transformation, collaborative transformation, innovative transformation? How do we do that from a people perspective if there aren't spaces for intermingling? And I think that's the issue we're having now. Not that spirituality and alternative views are, not accepted. They are, but now all of those people go only in one corner. And then the Christian fundamentalists are in another corner, and nobody sees each other. And when they do, they scream at each other from across the pond, right? That's the problem I think we're having now.
Yeah, there's two questions actually you brought up here. One is actually the word that came up to me is balance.
Yeah,
balance. The new, and actually this question is for the because my personally, I see a lot of new healers or energy works come online, right? Because energy is ready, people I feel called to. But I also see it's also part of it. I see that's also their path as well. But there are certain things that, not say we give people advice, but there are certain things that we might gonna bring up a little bit. You people call it to serve. However, that at the early of your serving people, a lot of our own trauma gonna bring up through our clients, because they are come to teach you, show you that something that you have not dealt with that. So not saying we are giving people advice, but through the energy right now, actually I feel like a lot of fellow energy healers, including myself, because I noticed that at first a year or two, I was like, why is this people here? What does this bring up inside me? Deal with a lot of things. Now I can feel more of like you become a vast ocean. Doesn't matter how many water drops in, you okay to hold a space. But at the beginning, it will be hard. So what are some advice that we actually can, suggest and give to the, new coming, even for some youth, like a young generation, because they are opening up, right? Now, maybe some of our personal experience guidance or some sort of things to guide people through.
Yeah. I think in any area of my life where I get really righteous and my ego gets out of control is usually in my judgment. You get to see how layered and karmic this is. My judgment of other healers, teachers, way showers who are projecting, advice giving, and maybe not doing the work themselves, right? I have to constantly check myself on that. And I have to check myself on that in the Akasha. And the Akasha reminds us that all people are on a path of soul evolution, like going down a river, and no place on that river is better or worse than anywhere else. We're all just on that river. And when we're on that river, we'll look to the shoreline and we'll seek a teacher, and that teacher will be there. And so there's a reality that there are millions of bridges from people to teachers who vibrate and connect of like mind. And so I work with my own self, and I'll definitely give some guidance on this as well. But this is also a message for other people like me who may feel judgmental or disconnected from other teachers' teachings. The reality is that you're just probably not on that point of the river where you vibrate with that teacher. And the truth is that teacher will vibrate with some people on the river that they need to, and those people are attracted to that teacher, like, and that's okay. And I think we need to hear more of that. I know I need to hear more of that, you know, as well, about like just trusting the process, because the river is moving. So there'll be a time where they evolve and move away from certain teachings. Like I see teachings about like living in a very aggressive way, or living in a way that is, you know, taking control or will over other people and willing your control through an expanded ego. And there's probably some warrior like essence, like that people that need to hear that message right now. Who am I to say that's wrong or right? It's just not how I want to teach. So, I mean, the advice giving is follow your own heart and what your heart wants to teach and say, but be a steward of your own work always, right? Be a steward of your own work. You know, I have been creating Akashic Training Module 2 now for the past few months, and there's so much of my own work that's coming up. And I know it's coming up because I'm creating this other work, and I can't get that work out there without working through my own stuff. And I think there are these moments where we have these major breakthroughs, where our own stuff is in our face, and we have to be intimate with that. We have to take pause and be present with that as teachers and healers and way showers. I think the work magnetizes. I think the work becomes more abundant. I think you attract more people when you're cleaner and more committed to your own self-work. I think people are way more savvy now than ever before. The guru disciple relationship is, you know, essentially over. That was a Piscean era thing, you know, so like people are questioning more. They're like, I don't vibe with this, swipe left, you know, people just do that more than ever before. So like as teachers, we need to be authentic. We need to be honest. We need to be intimate. I think we need to be vulnerable. We certainly also want to be committed to our own self-work. You know, with that being said, that's my righteous answer. I also recognize people who are not that they are allowed to be that too. And they are attracting the people they're meant to attract. And so that is, and I bow to that. And I just focus on my work over here. That's what I'm trying to do.
I just want to see where you come from, because sometimes people will talk about certain things and I can give the answer just logically. You can analyze why, right? Because you only attract what is you need to look into. Or and also people always say God never put anything that you cannot handle. The definition of how you handle is very different. You know, just because your human body didn't feel good, but you still spiritually or on your subconsciously, you need that kick in to start thinking about what I need to work out. So it's not my definition.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because it's true. And really, like, if you really think about it from a healer perspective, it's like, wow, who I am, what I am, and how I'm in relationship with my pain. That is what I'm attracting.
Yeah.
As a healer, way shower, teacher. So there's a direct relationship with that. So I think it's about, if we want to be something in the world, whatever that is, we have to trace that thread back to us and be in relationship with that stuff in our own life.
Yeah, that's the law of attraction. I always tell people, I was like, I will see who I interacted in my life and what's going on in my life, and I will go within to ask myself what are something working. Or you can use within without, like however it works. Okay. Now we're going to get back to the, not say most important part, the whole thing about, because I feel like we haven't even talked about the Akashic record, which you already probably opened from the beginning. And my record, I opened it an hour, 2 hours ago. I feel it's still opening. So I feel like, you know, for people, for our audience, if you have not noticed yet, pretty much probably 80% of what Candice said probably is through channeling. And myself too, that we go into the flow. Like always, I ask question. You already answer my question without I'm asking the question. That's the weirdest thing ever. But we're gonna talk about the Akasha record, and also myself. I went through. It's a 3 months training with you.
Akashic training module 1 is 6 weeks.
6 weeks. Yeah. So we met every week, and module 1 was teaching people, we're going to read our own records, right? And I passed. And module 2, we will talk about a little module 1 and module 2. And actually we, since the record is open. I believe it's open. And we're going to ask a little bit question for collectively, see, because I actually just watched your live. You do every month, right? Yes. I felt the energy, but I left the question because that day I didn't want to ask too many questions because I know that you're going to, on my podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to leave the questions for Monday. So yeah, okay. We'll talk about module number 1, module number 2. And also before that, one more question is, you have so many healing modality, right? How they relate to, how they intertwine with the Akashic record? Because people, I actually have you to just give the answer on your perspective, because I don't want to just direct people to a certain way, because you have, right?
Yeah, so you mean like, what is my perspective on how the Akasha is like intermingled with some of these modalities? Yeah. So I mean, I can't take it out of the work. It feels like it's inextricably tied. I feel like the Akashic field, as just a quick intro, is this 12th dimensional library where we have access to this like information source that gives you vibrational memory of every part of your existence in this life and every other lifetime and all of your ancestry. So everything that we experience has vibrational relevance, and you can go back and read that. And everything is also happening simultaneously, right? It's happening here. It's also happening there. There's this the concept in quantum theory about like having like particles to be able to be in two places at one time. That's that phrase, like being in two places at one time. Like, we are made up of particles. Particles can be in two places at one time. Our souls can be in two places at one time. Our experiences of lifetimes can be in more than two places at one time. So there's this reality that the Akashic field allows us to connect to parts of us that are untransmuted or wanting integration, wanting harmony. We can feel that because there's a density to that comes through information, through psychic senses, and then we can harmonize and reconfigure that information so that we can be more in alignment with our purpose. We can act from higher self and from true self versus act from pain body or trauma self. So the Akasha integrates with therapy. The Akasha and all the work that I'm doing with groups now is about using the Akasha as a platform to support people to transform themselves emotionally, physically, mentally, in the most graceful way possible, in the most easeful way possible, so they can feel fully connected to their purpose on this planet. I mean, I think the work is amazing, and I continue to be like surprised and inspired by what comes through my own record and what I'm creating in the world. And I just keep sort of following my feet and where it's going next. And module 2 is really a big deal. It's about emotional, like deeper ancestral work. It's about alchemizing our ancestry, not just from our concurrent lifetimes, but actually beyond our human lifetime and into our starseed connections, and actually calling in and coding and connecting through activation. So it's like, it's places I thought I would never take the work, that the work is taking me. I just hope that I've always committed to that, right? Like, am I in alignment with, can I bring this through? Am I in the space in my own life where I can hold enough love to bring this through? And I guess if it's coming to me, I'm meant to be it. I guess I can be it, but there's that question also, right? It's big work.
Yeah, you're doing it. Just like you told me before, you are doing it without you think you are doing it, but you're doing it. But we talk about a little bit ancestral, the word ancestral. I think through what you just mentioned, I feel like a lot of time we say this ancestral, we always relate to the human journey, like human ancestral. But we are talking about, actually, you mentioned the past lives. Like, you don't even need to be related to your ancestors, the ancestral part. So, and I think a lot of people still, hard to explain, and how you explain when you tell people, hey, the past life thing, not just the ancestral from your parents, grandparents, but your past life.
The Akasha has recently told me they do not want me to use past life anymore. And I'm trying to practice striking that from my vocabulary. They want me to use the phrase concurrent lifetime.
Concurrent. Okay. I'm going to pick up. Yeah.
So it's happening simultaneously. And how I describe it to people is, hey, remember when you were 7 and you had that traumatic thing happen? How alive is that in you still? And the person's like, oh my God, I can remember, I can smell, I can remember what I was wearing, I can remember where I was. We all have a memory like that. we're not in physical form of that memory anymore, but we still have access to it. That is a concurrent life experience
Okay.
that
So
exists.
do you think it matters to the point I don't even think it matters, because a lot of time when I do healing work, I either use data healing or Akashic record. Sometimes I don't even care whether it's my concurrent, like a past life or whatever, my ancestor. And because if I come to my field, I mean, to me, is okay, that means something. That's a story I need to go look into. So to the certain point, I don't really, maybe that's concurrent lifetime, maybe it's more fit now, because it doesn't matter it's my 5 generation up, my grandmother, great, whoever it is. It's more of a memory come into as it relate to the something that I'm going through. And I just need to working on that memory.
It's all about point of entry though, right? So like
Yes.
if you have access to a point of entry through the modalities that you know about, and you can access that pattern through another point of entry, then that's the way that is best for you. Some people may not have access to that pattern without looking at the ancestral connection. They might say, I don't have access to this pattern. I don't know this pattern. What is the pattern? You can actually trace it back and look through generationally or look through this current life. My sense about you, and this is obviously very intuitive, and I know you, is that we sometimes we just have this ability to be like, oh yeah, this is the pattern, this is the feeling, this is the thing. We don't really need to know where it comes from. I think the ego wants to know where it comes from. Sometimes knowing where it comes from for people who are trapped in a trauma state from a previous concurrent experience is a very healing thing for them to hear, that was then and this is now. Because there's a deep enmeshment of like whatever I'm fearing or whatever I'm in trauma with may happen now. So it is helpful sometimes to place it in time and space outside of the present moment, because it can create like a unit for them to ground and to call power source to them, because there's been so much flooding from the trauma, right? Like I see that with the clients I work with in the jail. There's so much flooding, and the identity is inextricably tied to trauma. So to be able to separate it out through time space can be useful for some people. But really, when I read the Akasha, they talk about concurrent lifetime experiences. They really show me the gist of the scenario as a way to access the pattern, because the pattern is the most important thing, and how we transmute the pattern. So I would agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, now let's come into some questions for the collective, right?
Yep.
Yes. And I want to brief audience a little bit. Everybody read Akashic record different. So it depends on your own psychic ability. Myself, clean sentence. And when I learned from Candice, I was trying to develop different senses, but they were like, "Hey, this is your number one, go with that." So I had to surrender because I was questioning myself, because I was like, how can is there any other, way to read it? But then they always go with you. Where is your awareness? Where is your consciousness? The Akashic record information shifts, depends on where's your awareness at. And every time I have more new information come in, which I never know it was there. But anyway, so question number 1 is about current energy. And I have some little bit different energy tap in, because end of March was crazy. I was on road trip and back home 2 days ago. Normally I would rush type of thing. For some reason, this time when it's Aries kicking, I know that, action, stuff like that. I have this immense of contentment inside me, and they have this slow down energy. I mean, is that something, is my own placement of all the things, or is also in the collectively has messages say, hey, because to me, I have a slogan: when everything moves so fast, I want to move slow. When everything moves so slow, I'm going to just go break the pattern. I don't know whether it's me or it's collectively.
Yeah, so the answer I hear from the Akashas is they said it's both. There's a sense of when you're in outside, or if you were on with your nature, they said if you're outside and you're immersed in, the exchange of particles with nature, it impacts your energy field. It creates like a harmonizing with the earth chakras, and we feel just more grounded overall. So I feel like that's a great tip for anyone who is ungrounded or who does feel rushed by the energy. So that feels like an individual answer, but the collective answer is also yes. Pluto in Aquarius, this is an air sign, but like that is a big deal astrologically, and that movement right now is almost like we're still feeling a very slow motion bump from that transition. So while Aries may inspire how to handle emotions, thoughts, words, we still have access and are likely feeling a very slow motion bump or speed bump that if we tune in to the frequency through meditation, through being outdoors, through more sleep and rest, we actually can feel like a sense of, let me pause. It's almost like this feeling of like, let me pause until everything gets settled. It's almost like when you're trying to look through your glasses and you wait a minute till it comes into view. That's what we're feeling in our sensory bodies, according to the Akasha with this Pluto transit. So if we can tune into that, yeah, we kind of just want to cocoon for a minute. I've been feeling that too. There's a lot of people sick as well, because there's a lot of detox around this like process of stabilization. So I think that's true as well.
Okay, the second question, everybody talking about solar flare and some conspiracy theory of, 3-day darkness or something going on. So can Akashic record to refer those solar flare? And I feel like there's certain word people putting on, but for myself, I can feel the sensation of my body, my crown, my third eye was 2 days ago. It was really, really strong. So is there something that we need to worry about things? Because, people get a freak out a little bit, especially, spiritual community. We follow a lot of different sayings. So I think we can clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, so we want to be really mindful of media exposure and access to fear-based information versus, I was going to say versus more like grounded information, and the Akasha laugh, like no such thing as grounded information. Everything is filtered through some form, right? Well, okay, so there's that. But solar flares are activations of fire, activations of heat within us. They call out triggers within us spiritually. They certainly have the potential to create slowing down in terms of technology on our planet. They also tell me in the Akasha that none of the actions associated with solar flares are like determined to create like harm on the planet. They're just like triggers or responses. It's a consciousness response to what's happening on the planet. So we're creating the solar flares through our healing, our changing, our movement. So when we use energy and reflect on those aspects as being a mirror of us, we may have a very different way of how we want to respond to it and how we want to show up in it. I do see in the future Akasha movement around technology, closing of technology, expanding of technology, regulation of technology, and our ability to have access to technology as being really the only like barely the scratching the surface of that. We may get a taste of what's likely to be confronted in the next 20 years, in the next 3 months, because of Pluto's dip into Aquarius. It's going to go back into Capricorn around June, and it will go now in 2024 into Aquarius for 20 years. So we are going to have a little blip now in the next 3 months of what's likely to come up. So what's coming up? Fear of not having access to technology, fear of things changing, fear of these solar flares impacting us and our ability to be safe and to connect. I think all of those emotions that are coming up are emotions that were already there, that were creating this magnetism, and that's part of this shift. So what we want to do between June and December is to look at what's come up now and to take active engagement and bringing a little bit more boundaries with our relationship with technology, a little bit deeper boundaries with our relationship with hysteria in general, and fear in general, and using a Buddhist mindset would be really great. Engagement through compassion, being in nature would be great. I'd say the next 2 to 3 months, let's look out for things like this that are triggering our emotions. We want to be asking that big spiritual question, right? What's this about for me? What's coming up in me? Because that's what everything is. The sun is responding to us all the time.
Yeah, this question I think is very interesting. They're probably gonna laugh at me or they just question me. Now, the more we talking about human connections, right, do all the things, and the technology on other side is boom, just so we are in this journey, right? Human journey is a big classroom. So what are they gonna say about this AR technology, which means gonna, I think it's true because I myself use a lot of AR editing stuff like that. It can save me hours because my workload is crazy right now. So I know what I'm doing, But also we talking about more human connection, getting into nature. On the other side is like AI is bam, just dropping from the air. So
yes, the Akasha says that this is powerful. I've never heard them say this before, but they said AI is neutral. And AI can be manipulated by people based on their interest and soul purpose and like motive to be a product on the planet that elevates and connects, or to be a product that separates and subverses connection. So AI itself is neutral. They show me a hot burning teapot on the stove as neutral, and how someone uses that. They can make tea and they can boil eggs and they can make coffee. They can transform it into something useful, or they can take the, the teapot and they could smack someone over the face with it and burn them. They could do something harmful with it. All of technology has this capacity for light aspect and shadow aspect. They would like us to be cautionary as human consumers, because our consumerism drives the way that technology is being delivered by humans and companies and capitalist societies, to be really careful about our boundaries and relationship with technology, to maintain connection as a high priority, to be using it for connection purposes, to connect to the work that you're trying to do in the world through your podcast, for example. Our ability to talk to you right now, you're in Michigan, I'm in Florida, like technology is serving a use of connection here. So they want us to be more critical about it, more discerning about it, not because it's that fundamentally itself, it's bad. It's neutral. How we choose to interact with it governs how it shows up. And there will definitely be those who use it for both sides of that coin, both shadow and light.
Yes. So the word that came to me is intention. What's your intention to use that thing,
and
right?
we haven't asked about that before. I think humans are going to start asking that much more now than they have before. I think before it's like technologies I've heard two phrases. Oh, it's so annoying to kind of to figure out. And the other thing I heard is, thank goodness for technology, it makes my life easier now.
Yeah.
Right. Makes my life easier. So I think we need to develop a more robust relationship with technology. We need to be more engaged in technology and make personal decisions about it. The Akasha said, very, very, very important. Very important.
Yeah. Okay, so the next questions that they actually, we're gonna back to the human connection again, okay? Because for a lot of things that are going on in the life right now, and this probably the questions more for the nonprofit. I found it. Things went so fast, I didn't even know how quick I can put this together. But we are a nonprofit for you, called United We Go. And when you were talking about the story sharing, so I was going to actually, it came in on my road trip, came in called My Story, My Voice. It's limited from like unity through diversity, kind of, but this specifically it's a 10 minutes of have people to tell them story, because we need to speed up the process. They're like, an hour podcast is great, but how can you, because I only can make 54, 56, I don't even know how many weeks a year, 54, 56, an episode a year. But then they're like, there's more story to be told right now. So that's My Story, My Voice came online. And, that's more of my personal questions. Is there something that feel like I could incorporate with my capacity right now?
It's interesting because the Akasha is saying that like there is a push to make things happen faster. And that's because, we are shortening our ability to hold space for discomfort in our own self emotionally and our life experiences. There's definitely a relationship with move faster, and that's how we succeed. And I really love Tricia Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance. She talks about racism and social redefinition as reparation through rest, through slowing down. It's a transformative book. It's about how our capitalist society creates this moving faster thing as a way to sell more, control more. So I think we each as healers and way showers get to decide how much of that we're participating in and how much of that we're resisting. So this idea of my story, my voice, there's this beautiful opportunity for you to show up in the world and share that, and to maybe do that in a way where it's focused and clear and grounded. And maybe that does mean shorter, but if it is shorter, it's for those reasons and not because the world doesn't want to move slower, because I think we need more people in the world inspiring people like Trisha Hersey is doing to slow down more. So I think you get to make that decision, like what are the values around it, and if you're honoring the values of groundedness and focus, versus just trying to run faster. Because if the faster we run, we're going to burn out, right? Like I think there's a value to that too, because in the Western medicine system, it's like, yeah, burn out. Sounds good to us. Then you'll come to doctors and you'll take medicine and like, right. So I think and these answers in the Akasha, they're never black and white, you know, they're full of like interpersonal reflection for you.
That's what I learned, because it's creating, it's more, not more for my podcast, it's more for in the community, you know, sometime dive into everybody an hour, as that in the community have a message spread out, like value everybody's voice, to tell their short story. And if need to be dive in, we will dive into the podcast as the deep one. But on that part, I would like Akasha Record to give people for maybe a 3 months of in the next 3 months, because when we air this podcast, it will be in next couple of weeks. So for in the next 3 months, let's say April to June, right? April, May, June. What are some certain things, maybe top 3 things that we need to pay attention to, that certain things we want to like look at?
Well, the first thing is, they said, we've already said this, but the first thing is to have relationship that's more deliberate, engaged, and intentional with technology. I hear them saying, number 2, what is your connection practice look like? Connection involves relationship with yourself, with your partner, with God, with nature, with your emotions. What does your connection practice look like? This is an important thing, because there's going to be lots changing externally. And if we don't have a relationship with ourselves, we don't really know what's true for us. We don't really know what's right for us. And because we're getting inundated with fast media now, telling us what's right, we are more easily influenced by it. So an unplugged connection practice, I hear the Akasha saying, needs to happen daily for everybody, even if it's 10 minutes a day, whatever it is. But it can't be putting in information. It needs to be connection, means presence, sacred awareness, right? And that could mean like walking or exercising or meditating or journaling or breathing, some kind of slowing down connection practice where media isn't on. That's number 2. Let me see what number 3 is. Oh, wow. So number 3 is take a risk and engage with an activity or a person that is diverse and different than you.
I love that. I don't know whether I love that is the most. Just the last question, or last 2 questions, is mainly for you, because I want to ask actually ahead of time, but now things bring back to this thing a little bit different. Do you feel that you choose as a white female? Of course, answer yes. However, you are not the first person actually in the last 24 hours brought up this white female. Like we were talking about in the community, the diversity. We talk about minority business owner, and then people brought up a white woman. So I want to just from your own soul level, how you see in this avatar doing the work, and then how difficult and why you choose that. It's supposed to be easy, but actually create a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting, because the way that I have been labeled by those that I work with in the jail as a white woman, I think that in this body, I look that way. And I think culturally, I have that influence. Biologically, I'm a first-generation Cuban. My father is an immigrant with very dark skin. And he has come to this country on the bootstraps, like most immigrants, in a capitalist world, striving to survive in a blue-collar environment. I haven't had as much influence from that culture because of a lot of shame and a lot of sort of secrecy with his own family and his own circumstances of being born onto this planet. I have more intimacy with it now than ever, especially as I'm working on the Akashic Module 2. It's being forced. But I think for me, there's both. There's what my culture and like what my skin looks like and how I'm doing the work from a place of sensitivity, awareness, interest, curiosity, and giving space for people to be seen and heard who look different than me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also allowing the part of me that has experienced oppression biologically, ancestrally, to also be seen and heard in myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tremendous amount of shame in my Cuban culture with in my dad's family of like talking about emotions, talking about things that are like taboo, and not having access to places and spaces for that, which I feel like the work I'm doing in the world now is an advancement and a love letter to that culture who rejects that.
Well, this actually would be our last question is, would you please just brief a little bit your module number 1, number 2, all those dates, right? And also I know your group 1 is going to open also too, like those dates where people to find you. But also before that, I want to let the audience know that as much as what we share, what we do, we are also on our different level of a healing journey, and the universe has its own way for what you create, but also we need looking into our own thing. So we are on this journey together, right? Constant healing. So yeah, would you share those information with us?
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm right now I have 2 options, actually 3 options of ways people can stay connected to me through community. And I'm teaching Akashic Training Module 1 in June. And this is Learning to Read Your Own Record. Module 2 is April 25th. And that will be like deeper reading, personal advanced reading, and ancestral and starseed access, cellular access. So that training is coming in April. Module 1 is coming in June. And I also have this container called Healing Collective, which is this like lovely space for consistent work within me in a sacred closed room space. So it's a 10-person to 12-person group. We're full now. I'll be having more spots open up probably around the time this podcast goes live. So if you like feel connected and called to like the Akashic work and would like to do individual work with me, this container offers that. We highlight 4 major themes that people are on this planet are working through at this season: transitions and loss, karmic relationships, finding purpose and meaning, and self-care through spiritual practice. So there's journaling, weekly journaling, accountability, and connection. And really I manifested that because people were saying, hey, I'd love to work with you more consistently. And I just didn't have the availability for that in an individual model. So the business and this is how it works with me mostly, is I just listen to the beat or the pulse of the earth and what's wanting to be created. It's very much like that. What wants to be created, what wants to be manifested, and then just stepping into that. And for me, in a glimpse of vulnerability, how it usually feels is overwhelm and pressure, and like, can I really step into it? Am I enough? Can I do it? And can I run faster? And I think I've had my own relationship with slow down. I manifest time space the way I want to and not how the world says I have to. And I'm still in relationship with that myself. But I'm still really grateful to offer these projects in the world. And they're deeply thought out, and like thousands of hours of committed intention and love and prayer and Akashic influence. So, I'd love to have people join my work. They can also join the Rasa Healing Network, which is a free space where I do the live predictions every month. And I also offer all of those groups just mentioned there in that space, along with curated spiritual content for the people who are spiritually hungry.
Yes. Okay. Lots of small questions. Like, you have 2 kids, right? And you have multiple offerings. How do you balance your life with your personal care? You mentioned that you manifest things, but how? Like, your hands are full. And I think people want to know how to multitask.
Yeah, that's like the underbelly of the whale, right? Like look behind the curtain, look at the tail of the tiger, right? Like hiding your tail. Like, I have an incredibly supportive partner. There's a lot of negotiation. I think society doesn't establish support for women, mothers, to be like primary breadwinners, to be mission drivers on the planet. I think it's happening more now than ever. I still work with inner programming around that. I'm really intentional and clean about when I have a project to create. There's definitely a hibernation mode I go into, and there's a lot more work and pressure my spouse has to take on in terms of family lifting. But when I'm in a pattern of like moving with the train, and the train is already moving. There's really intentional times even now that I'm in incubation and creation mode, where I'm with my children and he's off doing his thing, and I'm all in, right? And I'm all in and I'm present. And I think children need present parents. They don't need perfect parents. And I think women, children, girls, little girls, I know you have 2 girls, need to see mothers as badass warriors of healing on the planet. And I'm not going to be anything less than that, and I hope that for all the women out there who wish to change the world.
You are doing it. So thank you, Candice. I mean, we still haven't met in person. By the way, I'm coming to Tampa this Thursday. So actually,
Okay.
I was going to before. I was, am I going to come to swing by you? But I don't think it's the time allowed. But it's so crazy that we already did so many sessions together. I feel like I'll know you for a lifetime, and we haven't met in person. That's crazy stuff. But
yeah, all good. We'll find our ways. We meet on this plane, the next plane, physical plane. We'll make it happen.
Yes. So thank you so much. And for the audience here, again, our first episode we recorded last year is episode 15. It's still a lot of messages there. I feel it still apply today. But I just want to appreciate your time. I know you are very busy schedule. So I want to say thank you. And thanks also for the audience for tuning to this episode of Unity Through Diversity.
I love you dearly, and I'm always happy to be in relationship with you in this way. So
thank you for tuning into this episode of Unity Through Diversity. I will see you in next episode coming soon. Take care, and I love you.